Hi everyone, this is Cody from Pages of Pictures, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the rule of thirds, as well as show you some examples and kind of how it works to improve the composition of your photography. Starting off, a little overview of the rule of thirds. It is kind of a general guideline that a lot of photographers learn really early on in their stages of their career when they're just learning how to take photos, and honestly comes instinctively to a lot of photographers. It tends to look just a little bit more natural, if you will, to have your subjects off center just a little bit to try to improve the composition. So a lot of times this stuff will come naturally, which is what the rule of thirds does. Just try to improve composition of your photo by the placement of your subjects along the rule of thirds grid within your photo itself. So to start off here, we'll start with this first photo of these two mountain goat looking fellows on the left hand side of the page here. This big guy on the left hand side and then the little guy on the right both happen to fall directly on vertical lines of the rule of thirds. And this is important because you typically, when you utilize the rule of thirds, want to keep your subjects off of center. That's what it does. It helps you place them in spots within the photo that will just generally help to make it a better photo overall. With this photo itself, as I mentioned before, this is kind of a guideline, not a rule. This photo itself, it may have still been just fine if one of these subjects had been just a little bit to the right or to the left, but it makes it a nice logical progression for your eye to look at, seeing them both fall along these lines in similar spaces in the photo. Next, over here on the right hand side is a really nice usage of the rule of thirds. I like this a lot because essentially every portion of this photo that you would want to look at, or that you would want the viewer to look at as a photographer, falls along one of these lines on the rule of thirds. Everything from the skyline in the background falling along this top horizontal line to the shoreline or close to the shoreline falling along this bottom horizontal line. And then over here on the right you have the structure in the back on the beach itself, as well as its reflection, and then the two rocks falling along the right hand vertical line of the rule of thirds. So it's really nice placement of all the important parts of a photo into the rule of thirds. It just creates a nicer composition and it creates a nicer photo overall for the viewer to look at. This is another good example down below here of the rule of thirds, and I like this one as well because you see the structure here up on the top left hand side falling directly on an intersection, which is also a good a desired technique when utilizing the rule of thirds. It's not always just about getting them on the lines themselves. Sometimes, more often than not, you want to try to get them pointed at these intersections like the structure is here, the reflection, and then the goat's over here on this left hand side. The one on the right's a little below, but you get what I'm going for. Again, another example of this can be seen over in this same photo here, bottom right hand side, where these rocks here in the background aren't really a big part of the photo, but they add a lot to it just by being where they are in the photo. Your eye is definitely drawn to them just by the way that the structure is placed and the way that the cliff edge leads you down to the second set of rocks. This next set of photos that we have here is another good set of examples of the rule of thirds. This one on the top left hand side is a really nice usage of it because the two most important parts of the photo, the man's eyes and then the tip of the gun down here, both fall directly along lines of the rule of thirds. The gun extends out along the bottom left part of the bottom horizontal line, as well as his hand and part of the gun going down on the bottom left hand side of the left vertical line, and then his eyes up in the top right hand corner fall directly on the intersection again. Really good usage of the rule of thirds in composition there. To the right here, this photo of the fruit fly or whatever it is, sitting on the little leaf of the flower here, petal of the flower, if you will, is good usage just because the most important part, obviously, the little head of the fly with its big beady eyes that your eyes immediately go to, sit down directly on one of these intersections of the rule of thirds, and then it just kind of logically leads your eyes to the back so you can see that it's a fly sitting in a little patch of flowers, sort of. Really adds to the composition in that way. Had this fly been just placed directly in the center, you still would have been able to see it really well and would have been able to see the eyes very well, but you wouldn't have got as much in the way of where is he, what is he doing, and things like that. It just adds a lot more to the photo as far as what the viewer sees. Down in the bottom left, I really like this example of the rule of thirds, is where portrait photography is concerned. Now, this is a really good example because it shows you just what you can get if you use the rule of thirds in portraiture. Now, had this photo been taken with the subject dead center, we would have ended up with a mugshot, or the photographer would have ended up with a mugshot instead, and that's, not really what you're going for. And to some people, it may not have looked terrible, but I personally, and I think a lot of good photographers would agree that this looks a little bit better. It just adds a little bit more to the composition and looks less like a mugshot, having it placed over here along this right-hand vertical line, and then the bottom horizontal line as well. And the final example that I'll talk about today is probably one of the better examples that I've shown you thus far as the usage of the rule of thirds. Almost everything falls on a line of the rule of thirds grid within this photo, and it works out really well, and I'll explain why after I kind of go through the first part of this photo. Now, this is really nice, as you can see, because the skyline here falls along the top horizontal line, and then the flowers, as well as some of the subjects, their legs extending out, fall along the bottom horizontal line, and then you have the majority of the subjects themselves along this right vertical line. Now, the reason this is really nice isn't just because of the usage of the rule of thirds. Clearly, they've done a good job of placing their subjects and the important parts of the photo along the grid, but this is a great example because it shows why this works, and it shows why this improves composition. If you move this photo over just slightly, the subjects rather, over just slightly to the left of this photo and place them directly in the center, then while they're still the main subject of the photo, they then take over the entire background, and you get less effect of the fact that they're out in a big beautiful green meadow on a really nice day with these beautiful yellow flowers. That really takes away from that. Even if you may still be able to slightly see it in the background, having them centered in the photo, your eye just immediately goes to them and only to them. But when you look off to the to the right hand side and start with their faces right here on this vertical line of the rule of thirds, that automatically kind of leads you down and around and through this section here, which shows you the flowers on this bottom vertical line, and then naturally up through the meadow and then to the nice beautiful blue sky with a few clouds. So you can really see here that had this photo been taken just slightly differently, just offset the subjects just a little bit more to the center, and it really would have dramatically taken away from the composition of the photo. So that's why I think this is the best example of the rule of thirds that I've talked about so far, just because not only did they use the grid so well as far as placement of their subject, but it's a really excellent example of how it can just, overall help your composition. So that's about it. Just a quick reminder, you can find all of these images on Google Images. If you just go to Google Images/Google, you can search these and find them in pretty much any resolution and any size. Just search rule of thirds example or rule of thirds grid, something along those lines, and you'll get a nice array of examples if you want to look at a few more and try to get some more ideas about how it can improve your composition. So thanks for listening. This is Cody from Pages of Pictures.